11 spine-chilling sleepover stories revealed, unexplainable terrors that will haunt you forever. The sun slipped below the horizon, leaving a veil of dim light over the quiet suburb of Maplewood. It was perfectly serene, too serene. 5 teenagers huddled together in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of laughter from earlier in the day. Megan, Josh, Lila, Ethan, and Sarah had gathered for what might be their last sleepover before heading into high school. It was supposed to be a night of fun, but that gentle evening air felt heavy with something unnameable. They kicked off their sleepover with spooky stories, the kind kids whispered under blankets. Josh stood tall, voice quaking with mock bravado, recounting tales of the notorious Mr. Hollister. The once-loved neighbor had disappeared years ago, leaving nothing but fearful whispers in his wake. The words crackled in the air, chilling the camaraderie they shared. With each sinister detail, echoes of their own hushed breaths blended with the rustling leaves outside. Then, the flickering streetlight outside began to stutter, casting quickly shifting shadows across the faces of the group. Something felt off, like the night was holding its breath. Just as Lila shared a particularly spine-chilling detail about how Mr. Hollister was last seen lurking in his backyard, a hollow thud resonated from outside. They glanced at each other, uncertainty creeping in, but Megan cracked a smile. "It's just the wind," she said, though her voice wavered. Suddenly, everything went dark. A gust of wind rattled the windows as the power cut out. The teenagers fumbled, desperately pulling their phones from their pockets only to discover service was down. Panic flooded the room, their playful antics quickly warped into fear as they realized how isolated they truly were. "This is so not cool," Ethan muttered, eyes wide. They clutched each other for comfort, unsure of what to do next. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. The shadows around them felt heavier as anticipation built. Ethan jumped up, the adrenaline pumping through him. "Let's just go outside. Maybe help is just out there," he proposed bravely. But the words hung in the air like a dare. Lila's eyes darted toward the door. "What if we confront whatever made that noise?" she said. It felt almost like a challenge, one laced with dread. They stepped outside into the yard, breaths visible in the icy night air. The familiar landscape transformed into a foreboding scene. A figure emerged in the distance, barely discernible but undeniably there. Panic gripped them as they spotted a collection of items scattered on the ground. Clothes, toys, photos, all belonging to people who had vanished without explanation from Maplewood. The weight of vulnerability settled over them like a dense fog. With a shared glance, fear twisted their thoughts. What did they truly know about each other? A shiver ran through them as a low growl escaped from the darkness, freezing them in place. As shadows danced around them, they came to a harrowing realization. The danger wasn't just out there, the terror was closing in, lurking amongst them, and they were left to question not only what they faced, but who they could truly trust. The air was thick with dread, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. The shadows flickered, stretching ominously, and the low growl echoed once more, sending chills racing down their spines. "Get back inside!" Josh barked, his voice breaking through the paralyzing fog of fear. He turned, grabbing Megan's hand, pulling her hastily toward the door. Lila hesitated, looking back at the ominous figure. "What if it's just someone playing a trick?" she whispered, but Ethan's wide-eyed panic drowned out any logic. "It's not just a trick," he urged, glancing back at the threatening silhouettes creeping forward. "Let us go." They stumbled into the house, slamming the door shut behind them. The sudden silence was deafening. They huddled close, hearts pounding as they pressed against the door, ears straining to hear any sound from outside. Yet, only silence responded, oppressive and heavy. Do you think they saw us? Sarah broke the silence, her voice trembling. What if they're waiting for us? Shut up. Megan hissed, fear sparking in her eyes as she glanced at their faces. It was no longer just about the stories. They were now caught in a horror that felt all too real. Ethan found a flashlight and flicked it on, the beam cutting through the darkness. The dim light illuminated their terrified faces and cast long shadows across the room. We need to find a way to call for help, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. There's got to be a landline or something. Are you crazy? Josh shot back. What if we walk right into whatever's out there? Sarah stepped back, pressing against the wall. It's not just whatever. We don't know what it is. It could be Mr. Hollister. Megan's stomach twisted. The stories became too real too quickly, and she felt bile rise in her throat. Maybe we should just wait for the power to come back on, she suggested half-heartedly. The uncertainty hung like a noose around their necks, but before anyone could respond, a loud crash shattered the stillness. Something heavy slammed against the back door, rattling the frame. They jumped, the flashlight beam flickering wildly as Ethan wrestled it to steady it. Stay quiet, Josh whispered fiercely, eyes darting toward the dark hallway. The shadows seemed to swell as they held their breath, the quiet punctured only by the muted thrum of their racing hearts. The back door creaked again, strained against whatever force was pushing against it. Seconds stretched into eternity, adrenaline mingling with the scent of panic. Megan squinted into the murky hallway, trying to gather her thoughts. Should we look? Are you nuts? Lila hissed. No way. That's exactly what it wants. We gotta stick together. But the growl from outside was closer now, deep and resonant, raw, primal. An instinct to flee surged through Ethan as he moved to bolt the door, hands trembling. What if it gets in? He murmured, almost to himself. As Josh turned to grab a chair to barricade the door, the lights flickered back on, momentarily brightening the living room. Relief washed over them, but it was short-lived. A cold draft swept through, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps inside the house. Their eyes widened in horror as they realized that whatever was lurking outside had found its way in. Huddled together, they heard a whisper, soft yet piercing, "You shouldn't have come here." The air thickened, and fear coursed through them like ice. The revelation slammed into their minds. They were not safe within these walls. Not anymore. Each of them felt it an overwhelming urge to run. But where could they go? The unknown felt more threatening than any lurking figure. As the shadows deepened and the whispers grew closer, one question loomed heavy in the tense atmosphere: was one of them already lost to the encroaching darkness? The whispers faded into the shadows, but the unease hung thick around them. The flashlight flickered erratically, and Ethan's grip tightened on it as if it were a lifeline. The truth was undeniable: the danger was no longer outside. It was inside, and it was closing in. Where is it? Josh whispered, fear punctuating his words. They could all sense it, lurking just out of sight, something hungry and relentless. They were trapped like animals. Maybe it was a prank after all, Lila murmured, though her voice shook. We should check. Are you insane? Megan shot back, eyes darting around, searching for any sign of movement. Don't you get it? Something's here with us. A sudden movement behind them made them jump. A shadow flitted across the wall, quick and silent. They turned, breathless, and saw it, a figure, half hidden against the wall, its features obscured in darkness. Fear sent them stumbling back into the living room. What do we do? Sarah pleaded, her voice cracking under pressure. We can't just stand here. We need to split up, Josh said, his voice firmer than he felt. Maybe we can find a way out. The thought made Megan's heart race, but deep down, she knew they had no choice. No. Lila countered, shaking her head. It'll take us one by one. We have to stick together, or we'll all end up. A loud crash interrupted her, echoing through the eerily silent house. The sound came from the kitchen. They all turned as one, eyes wide with panic. "Simon," Ethan urged, his voice tinged with desperation. "We have to see what that was." Together, they crept toward the kitchen, every step heavy with the foreboding weight of uncertainty. The air felt colder here, almost suffocating. As they entered, the sight that greeted them sent their hearts plummeting. The table was overturned, chairs scattered, and a glass lay shattered on the floor, bits of glass glinting in the remaining light. But worse still was what lay in the center of the chaos, a dark, viscous substance, pooling like ink on the linoleum. "What the hell is that?" Sarah gasped, backing away as her eyes darted to each of them. "I think it's blood," Lila whispered, and a collective shudder ran through them. Without warning, the back door swung open, crashing against the wall with a force that rattled their bones. The wind howled through the opening, but it was nothing compared to the sound of laughter that followed. It was hollow and echoed, sounding like multiple voices, overlapping and sinister. A feeling of dread crushed them as they all turned to face the door where a figure stood silhouetted against the moonlight. A slow, deliberate step forward. Then another. The laughter grew louder, more menacing. "What do you want from us?" Josh managed, voice trembling, though he stepped back toward the others, instinctively pulling them closer. The figure paused. "You shouldn't have come here," it repeated in a choral chant, voices weaving together like a grotesque melody. Suddenly, the lights flickered again once, twice before plunging them into darkness. Panic exploded as they felt something shift in the room, the air thickening with malice, pressing in on them. Ethan fumbled for the flashlight, his fingers trembling. He clicked it on, and beams of feeble light flickered randomly, illuminating fleeting glimpses of twisted faces, eyes filled with hunger, jaws lined with something sharp. But as soon as he turned the light, they were gone, leaving only the echo of their laughter behind. "Get out! We need to get out now!" Megan screamed, and they surged back toward the door, yet the back door slammed shut, locking them in. Desperation turned to terror as they felt the walls closing in, like a vice around their sanity. Where could they go? Their sanctuary had turned into a prison, and the key was lost in shadows thicker than night. Suddenly, a crash erupted from above, the sound of footsteps thundering down the stairs. They exchanged frantic glances, all asking the same question without uttering a word: who else was here? What awaited them in the inky darkness of the unknown above? The laughter faded, but dread remained heavy, unyielding. As they fumbled for a way to the second floor, a chilling thought struck them: maybe they weren't alone after all. The darkness seemed to hum, vibrating with the weight of their fear. Each heartbeat echoed in their ears as they stood frozen, breathless, staring at the staircase that now loomed ominously above them. The sounds from above grew louder, a deliberate, crashing beat that seemed calculated to instill terror. What if it's one of the others? Sarah's voice was barely more than a whisper, each word trembling. They all instinctively shook their heads. None of them had seen Lila or Ethan since the crash. Or worse, Megan added, her pulse racing. What if it's them? Stop talking like that. Josh snapped, though he sounded scared as he glanced toward the tight space above. We need to check. Now. He moved first, feet swift and heavy, climbing the steps as if they might collapse beneath him. The volunteers followed, each step creaking under their weight like bones groaning in agony. Ethan shined the flashlight upward, revealing the hall that loomed before them, draped in shadows. Just a few feet away they could see a door at the end of the corridor, its wood weathered, flakes of paint falling like dead leaves. An unbearable chill crawled up behind them, making their skin crawl. Should we split up? Lila asked, her eyes wide, pleading for rationality amidst the fear. No way. Josh turned sharply, disallowing the thought. Together or not at all. They tightened their group as they reached the top step, their breath catching collectively as if caught in a trap. From somewhere off to the side came a soft, rhythmic tapping, a sound that sent ice slicing through their veins. What is that? Megan gasped, voice trembling. No, don't, Sarah warned, her face as white as the moonlight spilling through the nearby window, but they were compelled, drawn toward the noise. In a careful formation, they edged forward, light cutting through the gloom like a knife. The door they spotted suddenly swung open, creaking on its hinges, revealing a dimly lit room. Just inside, something moved, a fleeting movement, a sliver of dark against darkness. Ethan swung the flashlight toward it, illuminating a figure crouched low, a ragged silhouette peering at them with eyes impossibly wide and inviting. The unsettling laughter from before echoed again, this time softer, almost playful. Who are you? Josh shouted, heart racing, but his voice wavered at the edges. The figure giggled and leapt into the light, revealing a young girl grinning broadly, hair wild, dirt streaked across her face. You shouldn't be here. They'll find you. Lila. Megan breathed. No time. Run. The girl cried, throwing her hand toward the staircase, her small frame vibrating with urgency. It's not safe. Before they could process what was happening, the sound of heavy footsteps filled the hall, taking the girl's laughter and replacing it with something much darker. Groans tugged at sanity as malicious whispers crawled into their minds. Get out. Now. The little girl screamed, her eyes wide with terror. The shadows around them began to swirl and shift, as if alive, encroaching from every corner. As they turned to flee, the darkness surged forward, muffled cries erupted, clawing at their sanity, threatening to swallow them whole. Go. Go. Josh yelled, shoving Sarah ahead of him. Panic took over, and their instincts kicked in. They dashed back down the stairs, the sound of twisted laughter erupting behind them, but just as they reached the front door, the latch clanked, trapping them again. Desperation clawed at Ethan's throat. What do we do? We can't stay here. And from behind them, the girl's haunting laughter echoed, mingled with something much older, something waiting to pounce. Not all of you will make it out. As those final words hung in the air, they felt the shadows close in, ready to attack. Now their only choice was a leap into the unknown. Would they risk what was behind the door above, or confront the darkness that had enveloped them like a shroud? The decision was looming, and with it, the dread of what lay ahead. Their feet pounded against the wooden floor, the echoes of their run reverberating like the morbid heartbeat of the house. Shadows slithered on the walls. The air felt thick with dread, each breath heavier than the last. There was no time to look back, to question the girl, to comprehend what was chasing them. Where do we go? Sarah gasped, her eyes wild as she bounced from one shadow to another. They were trapped in a maze where every path seemed to lead further into darkness. Out. We need to get out. Josh replied, his voice strained and urgent. They reached the front door, yanking on the handle until their hands slipped, slick with sweat. It wouldn't budge. Ethan swung the flashlight frantically across the room, illuminating the edges of the ominous hallway they had just escaped. The shadows twisted, contorting chillingly into shapes that could almost take form. Whispers crept closer, hushed, sinister conversations that mocked their struggle. There's a window. Megan shouted, pointing. She sprinted toward the far side of the room, desperate for escape. A small, grimy window sat there, just high enough to offer a glimmer of hope, but the glass was thick, streaked with years of dirt and grime. Help me. Megan pleaded as she jumped, her hands grasping the wooden frame. For a moment, it looked promising. The sunlight that managed to peek through seemed to shine past, igniting a fire in their hearts. But fear clawed at them, and as they rushed to assist her, the laughter returned sharp, piercing, echoing from the very walls, a sound that twisted their insides. A chill swept over them, and the temperature plummeted. Josh felt it seep into his bones, dragging him backward, pulling him into the cold maw of despair. Keep going. Don't stop. He yelled to Sarah and Ethan, but as he turned toward them, he felt something cold and dark brush against his leg, like icy fingers beckoning him back into the shadows. Megan's shout of triumph turned into a scream as she struggled with the latch, fingers slipping, heart racing, but she was almost there. The others held back the creeping shadows, their eyes darting about as if they could see what lurked beyond sight, what darkness wanted them. "Come on, come on!" Megan screamed, knees pressing against the wooden frame as if she could break free with sheer willpower. The hinges creaked ominously, a warning of the darkness trembling just out of view. "Faster!" urged Sarah, fear knotting her throat. Just then, the door slammed shut. No! They felt that an oppressive force had clamped down on them, freezing them to the spot. The little girl's voice invaded their minds, more sinister now. "You'll never leave, not all of you." The shadows swirled wildly, architecture of fear bending reality around them. Ethan's heart thundered in his chest, a primal urge to escape overpowering his logic. "Break the window!" he gasped, directing his urgency at Megan. With a final push bursting from her lungs, Megan battered against the window, slamming her fists until cracked spiderweb the frame resisted, but she was unyielding. Her breath came in terrified gasps, but all at once, with one last strike, the glass shattered, shards raining down like crystal daggers. "Jump!" Josh yelled, eyes instinctively shifting to the shadows pouring from the corners. Megan squeezed through the jagged opening. As her body slipped beyond the confines of that cursed room, the cold, dark grasp of the hallway surged forward, hungry, desperate. A muffled scream echoed, blending with the sinister laughter as the shadows lunged toward Josh and Sarah. The weight of unseen horrors pressed on them, threatening to pull them into the abyss. And as the house trembled, rattling like a caged beast, one final thought struck Ethan like a bolt of lightning. What if they had to leave someone behind? In that moment, the oppressive atmosphere thickened further. Time stretched, fingers of fear clutching tighter than ever. The only certainty was that something was coming, something they couldn't escape. "Make your choice." A voice murmured from the darkness, as if the shadows themselves dared them to decide. That as desperation surged, Ethan realized they had a choice to make: a flight to safety, or a sacrifice in silence, and the clock was ticking. What would they decide? The darkness curled around them like a living thing. Breathless, Josh's eyes darted back to Sarah, whose face was pale, haunted. He could see the silent panic reflected in her wide eyes. Shadows twisted, creeping closer, filling the corners of the room with a weighty fog that felt alive. "Ethan!" Josh's voice was a desperate whisper. "What do we do? We can't just stand here." Ethan's mind raced, the female voice still echoing in his skull, taunting him. "Make your choice." But what choice? Leave a friend? The weight of the question knotted his stomach. He could feel it, the house pressing in, the shadows teasing him with promises of despair. "Look!" Sarah pointed across the room. The hallway they had just escaped twisted into an impossible angle, an unnatural bending that should not be achievable in reality. But it was happening. Distorted, it seemed to breathe, and from it, the laughter grew louder, sharper. It clawed at their sanity, igniting a primal terror deep within. "Now!" Josh shouted. "We need to move." The shadows surged forward, hungry for them, wrapping around Josh's ankles, tugging at him. He stumbled, fighting for his balance. Ethan could only watch as Josh was nearly dragged into the dark. "Help!" Josh gasped, clawing at the floor, nails scraping wood. Ethan lunged forward without thinking. "Grab my arm!" he yelled, reaching out. But Sarah was frozen, shock rooted her feet to the ground. "Don't leave me!" Josh pleaded, despair thick in his voice. In a single moment of sheer instinct, Ethan lunged and grabbed Josh's hand, pulling him back. But the shadows shrieked, a sound that tore through the very air, filling it with dread. The darkness wasn't just trying to grab him, it wanted them all. The pressure increased. Ethan felt his muscles straining, heart racing. "Now!" he urged with strained breath, dragging Josh. "Run!" Sarah finally moved, eyes frantic, a burst of determination breaking through her paralysis. They raced together, weaving through shadows that twisted and darted around the flickering beam of the flashlight. They were back towards the entrance where the front door slammed shut. "Why won't it open?" Josh shouted, kicking the wooden barrier in hopeless rage. He spun around, feeling the shadows close in. "It's not letting us go." Ethan's mind screamed. He pointed toward Megan's escape route. "The window. We can still make it." The trio pivoted toward the jagged remains of the shattered glass. But a chilling howl erupted from the dark hallway, a noise different from the laughter, a sound of pure rage. Without warning, the shadows surged forward, diving at them like a tidal wave of darkness. "Go. I'll hold them back," Ethan cried, urging his friends forward. The moment the words left his mouth, he felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine, an ancient disapproval echoing from the very walls. Josh grabbed Sarah's wrist. "No. We can't leave him. Ethan, please." Sarah screamed, but Ethan felt a mix of bravery and terror. "Just go," he shouted, as the edges of his vision blurred. The shadows clawed at him, icy fingers gripping his limbs, pulling him close, whispering sweet venom into his soul. They were drawing him deeper into their grasp, and for a fleeting second, Ethan saw a glimpse of Megan running away, free from the chaos. "Please," Ethan whispered, feeling their cold breath on his neck. "Leave now." Sarah hesitated at the window's edge, fear and determination mingling in her eyes. This was it. A dying cry of despair rang out as the darkness closed in. And right before the abyss swallowed Ethan whole, the shadows froze. A silence enveloped them, a calm before the storm. "What are we going to do?" Sarah breathed, her voice a faint whisper. As the air thickened, the walls trembled, and a new voice joined the tethered whispers. "One must stay," it breathed, and the house shuddered, a heartbeat echoing in the petrified stillness. The shadows receded for an instant, revealing an ancient door hidden in the wall, a door that hadn't been there just moments before. Each of them stood frozen, terror etched into their faces, as the brass handle glinted like an ominous eye. "What if we open it?" Josh murmured, uncertainty gnawing at his resolve. Everyone knew, deep down, opening that door could change everything. But was it a doorway to freedom or a gateway to something far worse? Time hung in the balance, and they had to decide. The silence shattered as Sarah stepped forward, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity. "What if it leads to safety?" she asked, glancing back at the shadows, which seemed to pulse with anger, as if aware of their indecision. Josh shook his head, terror flickering in his eyes. "Or it could be worse. We can't even trust this place." Ethan felt his insides twist, caught between the fragile pull of hope and the suffocating dread wrapping around them like a serpent. "Maybe there's a way to save him," Sarah insisted. The shadows responded, a low growl echoing through the room, vibrating underfoot like a warning tremor. "Whatever happens," Ethan managed, his voice barely a whisper, "we have to stick together." The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy with urgency. But the shadows began to stir again, restless and hungry. Just then, the door creaked open slightly, revealing a dark void beyond. It was more than just shadow, it felt like a mist, a smothering cloud that pulled at their minds, tempting them with unspeakable secrets. Josh edged closer to it, heart hammering. "We should try," he ventured, before the floor beneath them trembled violently, splintering the air with a crack that struck like lightning. "Back away!" Sarah screamed as the wall furled and contorted, warping around them. Shadows circled, their laughter turned malevolent, forming shapes that danced in and out of the light. Screams of despair filled Ethan's ears, voices calling for help from the abyss on the other side. What is happening?" Josh stammered, eyes wide, as he took a step back. "Wait, we have to think. What if that door leads to a way out for Ethan?" Sarah shouted, fingers trembling against the brass handle. "No. It's a trap," Ethan urged, every muscle tensing. The reality felt twisted, time distorting as he felt the shadows slithering towards him, urging the choice to be made. What if one of us stays? Sarah said suddenly. We can figure it out from here, but one of us could still get help. The suggestion landed like a bomb. Ethan's heart dropped, he felt sweat trickle down his spine. What do you mean? No one is staying here. We can't do that. Josh's face shifted, eyes darting between Sarah and the door. Maybe it's the only way. Maybe one of us needs to confront whatever is on the other side. A pulse of dread swept through Ethan, the thought clawing at his mind. As if hearing their thoughts, the shadows danced faster, calling them forward with a seductive allure, wrapping around Josh and Sarah, whispering promises of escape. Stop. You're both insane. Ethan roared, panic flooding him. We're stronger together, not apart. But Sarah's eyes shone with an unsettling glow, a determination fueled by desperate hope. We fight to live, Ethan. We need to take the risk. As the shadows writhed in anticipation, Ethan felt his grip on reality slip. No. You can't. But it felt like his voice was lost in a roaring storm. The ancient door trembled, pulsating with energy, waiting for their decision. The shadows felt closer, suffocating every rational thought. Whatever you choose, he shouted, make it now. Suddenly, the door swung wide open, revealing a swirling abyss of darkness. The air thickened like syrup, heavy with despair and temptation. The house seemed to breathe, letting out a low, mournful sigh, as if it too was waiting, taunted by their indecision. That a heartbeat echoed through the air. They had to choose. As their minds spun with fear and uncertainty, Ethan suddenly felt a coldness wash over him, freezing his veins. An ominous realization dawning: those who entered never returned together. He whispered, a plea hanging on the edge of hope, but the shadows responded with a deafening roar, ready to claim their choice as minutes slipped away. Would they walk through the door to face unknown horrors or risk leaving a friend behind? Time was running out and terror loomed ever closer. Ethan's heart raced, the seconds ticking away like time bombs. The shadows twisted closer, their whispers slithering around him, urging him to yield. He could feel the cool breath of the void, an invitation laced with promises that tangled in his thoughts. Every instinct screamed at him to run, yet the weight of Sarah's and Josh's eyes anchored him, drawing him back to the decision they faced. Ethan. Sarah's voice trembled, her grip on the door tightening. We can help him. We have to try. Her voice was a knife, slicing through his fear, but also sharpening it. The desperate light in her eyes seemed to ignite a flicker of resolve deep within him. Then we all go. No one gets left behind. He shouted, desperate to drown out the shadows that giggled within his mind, promising them freedom from this hell. Suddenly, the abyss bloomed wider, an inky blackness that threatened to swallow them whole. Ethan felt the pull of the door, as if it were an unseen force yanking him forward. He was teetering on the edge of oblivion. Do you hear that? Josh's voice broke through, raw with panic. Something's coming. The air thickened, an almost tangible mass that pressed down upon them. Breathing became difficult, like trying to inhale through a vacuum. The shadows, as if sensing their disorientation, began to shift into grotesque forms, clawing towards them, hungry, ravenous. Ethan could see faces in the darkness, twisted expressions of joy mixed with horror, and it filled him with a dread that clawed at his throat. Get back! Ethan yelled, instinctively pushing Sarah and Josh away from the door, as if his body could shield them from the inevitable. They stumbled, falling back against the wall, but the shadows were relentless, slithering over his feet, dragging him towards the open void. Ethan! Sarah screamed. Her eyes were wild, glistening with fear. Fight it! Come back! Terror bubbled in his chest, but deep down, an ember of anger ignited. No! He wouldn't let something as dark and vile as this claim him. Not without a fight. With every ounce of strength, he tore his gaze away from the abyss, focusing on his friends instead. We can't surrender. He shouted, gripping onto the architecture of fear that enveloped them. Together. We pull each other back. As if on cue, Josh grabbed Ethan's arm, his grip fierce against the tide of darkness pulling him toward despair. "Together," he echoed, defiance burning in his voice. Sarah interlocked her fingers with Josh's, their arms creating a barrier against the encroaching shadows. "We can't let it win." The ground trembled beneath them, the house roaring a mournful protest as they fought against the swirling darkness. It felt alive, as if the very walls were craving to see them bend, to watch them break apart. Ethan heard whispers clawing at his mind, taunting him with nightmares of being alone, of betrayal, of drowning in darkness. But instead, he dug deeper, feeling his friends anchor him. Together, they would resist this vile force. The shadows recoiled at their united front, swirling, twisting, almost in confusion. For a moment, they hesitated. A flicker of doubt in their sinister voices echoed around the room. "Hold on," Ethan urged, tightening his grip. "We can do this." In that second, a beam of pure light erupted from somewhere deep within the house, bathing them in a blinding radiance. It shattered the shadows, creating fissures of gold in the darkness. The room trembled once more, as if caught between existence and oblivion, but the light was fleeting, shadows clawed and crept back, their laughter turning hideous once more. Darkness raged, and echoes filled the air. "They cannot escape, no," Sarah shouted, her voice piercing through fear, rallying to Ethan. "This is ours. It belongs to us." Then a crack echoed, reverberating in the room. The ancient door began to close on its own, the unrelenting shadows on the other side trying to squeeze through, clawing, shrieking in fury. Ethan could feel panic rising once more, the sound of conflict looming over them. "We need to decide. Now. Do we go through together or find another way?" "Why do we have to decide?" Josh asked, breathless, confusion twisting his features. "There must be something else." But Sarah had turned her gaze back to the door. "Maybe," she whispered, her breath catching. "Maybe there is a way to seal it for good." The shadows shrieked, raking against the walls, echoes of lost spirits and forgotten souls wrapping around them, begging them for release. Ethan swallowed the growing knot of anxiety. "If we don't go now, it'll swallow us whole." With one last glance at his friend's hope and despair swirling within him, Ethan took a step towards that cursed door once more. Behind him, Sarah and Josh watched, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. As he reached forward, the ground quaked violently again, and he could already feel the clock ticking down. Would they seal the darkness away, or would they walk into its hungry embrace? The air grew heavy, crackling with tension. The shadows roared, waiting for the signal to surge forth. The moment teetered on a knife edge, and they were running out of time. Ethan's fingers brushed against the door's cold surface, its frame coated in a dark, pulsating energy. He felt it thrum beneath his touch, a heartbeat at once both alarming and inviting. He glanced back at Sarah and Josh, horror and bravery woven into the fabric of their expressions. They were more than just friends in that moment, they were lifelines tethering him to sanity in a house that breathed terror. "Do it!" Sarah shouted, her voice slicing through the dark like a searchlight. "We can't give in." With a sharp intake of breath, Ethan pushed against the door, probing the unknown. The wood was rough and gritty, and tremors surged through his body as if the very fibers were alive. The door creaked, the shadows behind it hissing in response, a chorus of desperation that sent a chill coursing through him. Then, suddenly, the door swung wide, revealing a blinding white light that seemed to buzz with energy and chaos. Before he could think, before he could even blink, he was dragged inward by the unrelenting force of the void, the pulsating shadows clawing, screaming behind him in furious pursuit. "Ethan!" Josh's shout echoed in the dizzying space, and he felt the strong grip of his friend pulling him back, the strands of fear almost tangling him like spider silk. As he crossed the threshold, the light swallowed him whole. Its warmth was deceptive, a dangerous siren singing sweetly to him while shadows writhed in filmy tendrils just beyond reach. It felt like stepping into a dream filled with blaring alarms, all beautiful yet utterly grotesque. Ethan felt weightless, yet he sensed the ground beneath his feet. He could see his friends materialize beside him, swirling shapes caught between two realities, one of horror and the other of an uncharted hope. "Where are we?" Josh breathed, his voice thick with confusion. The space around them shimmered, a kaleidoscope of images and sounds. Ethereal whispers tousled their hair, brushing past their skin like icy fingers. Every soft murmur felt charged with years of unbearable sorrow, telling stories of lost souls bound in despair, waiting to be freed or consumed. "Look!" Sarah shouted, her arms lifting toward the swirling forms circling them, faces flickering like flames. "They're trying to communicate." One of the specters surged forward, its eyes wide with a desperate longing. It reached out, fingers like wisps of smoke grazing Ethan's forearm. A shock of icy fear shot through him, intertwined with an urgency he couldn't shake off. It wanted him to understand something about the door, the abyss, the shadows, and then the vision broke. The room around them twisted, the light shredding into fragments as the shadows clawed their way back with vengeance. Ethan felt a tugging at his heart, a chilling compulsion to drown himself in the darkness. But the specters now surged forward, their ethereal forms clashing with the encroaching gloom like warriors from two different realms. "No!" Ethan shouted, straining against the pull of the shadows threatening to sweep them away. The air crackled as if reality itself were tearing. Desperation swirled in him as he clung to the others, the spiraling chaos around them tearing at the seams of existence. Ethan's mind raced. What did it mean? Were the spirits there to help, or did they harbor agendas darker than what lay behind that ancient door? Then came a shattering roar, painful and primal, splintering the very foundation of their new world. The specters' howls melded with the darkness, the chaos reaching a fever pitch. "We need to choose." Sarah screamed, the intensity of the moment pulling every ounce of resolve from her voice. "We have to decide." They all turned toward the door behind them, the shadows wrestling and surging, almost in celebration of their turmoil. "Which side do we trust?" Josh asked, his voice strained with desperation. Ethan's heart thundered, a relentless drumbeat rising in his chest. "Do we pull the door closed or risk everything to fight?" Light and dark twisted around them, an abyss begging and wailing, and as Ethan considered their fragile choice, he felt the world teeter again, caught between despair and an uncertain salvation. What if they stepped through the door and it sealed forever, trapping them in darkness instead? Or perhaps, if they brought it crashing down, they'd break the shadows and set the lost spirits free? Time slipped further away, each breath heavy with the weight of their decision. The shadows surged again, ravenous and insatiable. Would they be consumed by the darkness, or could they turn their fears into a beacon of light? Ethan felt time slip away in the swirling chaos of light and dark. The weight of their choices pressed down on him, like lead in his chest. "We can't stay here," he shouted, trying to maintain his focus amidst the tempest of visions dancing around them. The specters flickered, their faces pleading, their arms reaching out as if begging him to understand. "Ethan." Josh's voice cracked. "What do we do?" Panic flooded the air, thick and tangible, wrapping around them like a noose. Ethan steadied himself, looking deep into their eyes, the determination, the fear, and most importantly, the friendship that bound them tighter than any shadow could. "We've fought too hard to give up now," he declared, a surge of courage igniting in him. "We choose to fight." Josh and Sarah nodded in agreement, solidarity illuminating their fear. "And we seal that door for good, so it can't take anyone else." Josh added, voice rising above the chaos. They turned together, facing the ancient door behind them. The shadows seethed, twisting in agitation, their whispers morphing into screams of frustration. The air grew thick around them, laden with palpable dread, but they stood firm. "On three," Ethan said, heart racing. 1, 2, 3. They rushed toward the door, reaching for the handle as it quivered in the tempest of darkness. Hand in hand, they gripped the handle, feeling its icy surface pulse under their fingers. With a mighty heave, they pushed. The hinges screeched like tortured steel, groaning against the force of the encroaching gloom. The shadows recoiled, their anguished cries filled the air, a cacophony of lost souls trying to claw their way back into the light. But Ethan, Josh, and Sarah dug deeper, fueled by sheer willpower and determination. With one final push, the doors slammed shut with a resounding bang, a blinding light exploded from the seams, illuminating the chaotic shadows, forcing them to withdraw. The darkness writhed as if in agony, shrieking and howling, but the trio stood firm, their feet anchored in defiance. The light began to envelop the room, a brilliant halo of salvation spreading, expanding, pushing against the very fabric of the house. Suddenly, that horrible laughter shattered, warbling into silence as the shadows disintegrated, fading into vapor. The specters swirled with the light, their forms becoming ethereal sparks, drifting toward freedom. Ethan felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. This was their legacy, a moment of triumph against the darkness and affirmation of friendship. As the last remnants of shadow dissolved, a sense of calm washed over them. The air felt lighter, almost fresh, and the oppressive weight humbling into a gentle breeze. What just happened? Josh asked, blinking at the now serene space. I think we did it, Ethan replied, breathless. The door that once led to anguish was gone, sealed away along with the terror that had haunted Maplewood for so long. Megan, her eyes glistening, stumbled into their embrace, her face etched with relief. I thought I'd lost you, she whispered fiercely, pulling Ethan tight, gratefulness unfurling like a flower in spring. Lila soon followed, so thankful and relieved that it felt like a dream. They shared laughter, tears, and the joy of survival, emotions battling for supremacy. Each of them, Josh, Sarah, Ethan, and Megan, realized they had faced their fears, and together, they were stronger than ever. We'll tell the others, Lila added, determination reigniting her spirit. They need to hear our story. No one else will have to go through this. The group nodded in agreement, their shared experience would light the way for those who would hear it. They would ensure that Maplewood was free from the shadows and that no one else would be ensnared in a nightmare like theirs. As they stepped outside into the early dawn, the sky awash with colors they never thought they'd see again, the windows of the house shimmered with a new light. In that moment, as warmth enveloped them, they knew they had emerged not just as survivors, but as warriors of light bound by unbreakable trust. Their laughter danced through the cool morning air, forging a new beginning by the rising sun, a potent reminder they had avoided the dark, standing together to illuminate the paths ahead. Now, you've journeyed with them through the darkness. These stories don't end here. You need to subscribe now so you won't miss a single thrilling chapter. Smash that like button now to show your support and help feed the algorithm. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories. What do you think will happen next? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. There's so much more to explore together. Your support means everything.